G'day folks, my name is Rob. Welcome back to another F1 fantasy video. Today we are looking at my team selection for race week 12 ahead of the Hungarian Grand Prix this coming weekend. As always, if you enjoy the content or are new around here, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel. It means a great deal to me on the journey to 1,000 subs on YouTube. So before we jump into my team makeup, I want to take a quick look at how things went in Silverstone. Verstappen underscored a 237-point performance for the team with 92 points with the DRS boost. A pretty dominant weekend, first in qualifying, first on the race. So has very much continued that trend lately, and I can't see that stopping anytime soon. While we're on Red Bull, Perez also continued his trend of qualifying pretty poorly, but did make up a number of positions after starting from P15. Finished the race in 6th, banked those overtakes and those positions gained. So solid, not spectacular. I guess the reason why I'm not really getting cold feet on Perez is just because he has such a high floor. If he does qualify poorly, he's got those overtakes and positions gained. Huge upside for someone in a car like the Red Bull where it's just so dominant and can really pick off drivers ahead of them with quite significant ease. So I think he's definitely a lock in my team for the foreseeable future. And if he does drive well, qualify well, then he's in the box seat for points on the Sunday for those drivers that finish around the podium places. So even though outside of the fantasy landscape, it doesn't look so great for him, as a fantasy owner, I think he's still a must-have at the moment, given how strong the Red Bull is, and as well as the fact that they're expecting upgrades in the coming weeks as well. For Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso, 12 points. Not a huge weekend for him. He has had a couple of weekends lately where they just haven't really reflected the point scoring potential he's shown earlier in the season. I think part of that's just to do with the fact other teams have introduced upgrades and Aston Martin have probably been lagging behind a little bit in that department. Notwithstanding that, they are expected to not only bring upgrades in the forthcoming races, but they are also anticipating a much better performance from the car at the Hungaroring because of that high downforce setup that favours those lower speed corners. So I think that's going to work quite well for the Aston Martin, and a lot of people are understandably moving towards McLaren assets, which we'll get to momentarily because of their recent form, but I wouldn't jump off Aston Martin immediately just because of the things in mind that I've just mentioned. Lance Stroll, very, very disappointing weekend for him, not just from a fantasy perspective either, but he's 2 points, not great for his owners, myself included, and definitely one of the drivers on the chopping block for me coming into this weekend. So, I think I've given him the benefit of the doubt for the most part this season. He's only been out of my team, I think, for one race when I replaced him with Pierre Gasly. So really just interested to see what the team makeup will be if I am to move him on. And Joe, 6 points, can't really get too upset about that given he's a budget driver and actually scores more than 1 point per $1 million spent on him. So anything above or better than a DNF for a budget driver, in my opinion, is a good result. Red Bull 77, Aston Martin 22. So a little bit of deliberation, certainly in regards to the Aston Martin assets. We'll get into that right away. So looking at how the team shapes up for this weekend, obviously the biggest news that's come through in the last week is the Daniel Ricciardo announcement to AlphaTauri. I've covered that in a previous video a couple days ago, so if you haven't checked that out, be sure to do so. Very much dedicated to how I think he's going to go, what I consider him as value in terms of an F1 fantasy asset, and whether or not he should be in your team, and ultimately if that makes him part of the template based on his price point. At the time of recording, he just was recently introduced into the F1 game, so we'll see his face on the screen shortly. He priced at $4.5 million, so pretty much a like-for-like change with Nick de Vries. So as I mentioned previously, McLaren's obvious good form is an omen, I think, for a lot of people to move off the triple Aston Martin template component. I, for one, as I said already, don't think the Aston Martin should be written off so quickly because of the fact that their current car setup favours the Hungarian Grand Prix more so than the McLaren. Norris has said on record that the McLaren itself is not great in the slower speed corners, so that would obviously work in favour of the Aston Martin. I'm not suggesting you need to go all in on Aston Martin or all in on McLaren, but I think I will certainly approach it where I'm hedging kind of a bit of both Won't make any decisions until practice, but I certainly think it's something to think about because the Aston Martin has struggled recently, but they are confident they'll turn it around this coming weekend. Where I'm at right now, I think the most logical, obvious, and first move I'll be making is Joe out for Ricardo. I've had Joe for a couple of weeks now, a solid driver, but looking for, I guess, not just variety, which Ricardo affords because of his at present 0% ownership, but also because he comes into a team which is desperate for results, and I think that experience is going to really add some value to him, even though that AlphaTauri, isn't all that convincing. But I guess wait and see until practice, notwithstanding that driver of the day candidate, an extra 10 points in your pocket if he gets that, I think is a very high chance too. So I think Ricardo is the first name on my team sheet for this coming week, which leaves me with 2 extra trades. And for those of you that have been able to roll the extra trade every other week, certainly works in your favor this coming week. For me, at the moment, my first preference is to switch out Lance Stroll for Oscar Piastri. Again, I want to see how the McLaren goes in practice, but that's kind of where my head's at right now. I do like the McLaren constructor, only because it covers not only Norris's output if you don't want him in your team, but also because recently they've had a couple of weekends lately where they've had the fastest pit stops among all teams. And so for me right now, I can't afford that. I'm 0.3 short to get to McLaren. So the alternative route for me, if I wanted to double up or at least go in on more than one McLaren asset, would be to take out Alonso for Lando Norris, which I think I have equal amount of money for. Yeah, so I could potentially do that. That's one option for me at least. The other option would just be, as far as running a team's concerned, is to leave Alonso in and hope that the current car setup for the Aston Martin works in favour and as expected at this circuit. So they're the kind of 2 bills I'm weighing up. I haven't really gone anywhere near the other premium teams, and the budget drivers just aren't really selling me at the moment. If you did, for whatever reason, want to go triple McLaren, look, I think that's certainly viable. Do I myself see myself doing that? Probably not. I am someone that likes to probably hedge my bets a little bit. I say that quite ironically, given I've been running triple Red Bull, triple Aston Martin all season. But if you do feel obliged to do something like that, it would mean downgrading Ricardo and bringing in, well, in my case, I can't afford it. But if you've been so lucky to ride these price increases, you might be able to jump on someone like Nico Hülkenberg. Do I like this more necessarily? Probably not. Not just because of the fact that you've got Hülkenberg in your team, but for reasons mentioned about Aston Martin, I think they're certainly more viable, at least for this race. If you do, or if we find that the following race, the McLaren looks like a more attractive option, I think it's Spa, is it not? Yeah, it is Spa. Obviously Hungary this weekend. So there is talk that we might see the McLaren rebound a little bit more in Belgium if they aren't expected to perform quite as strongly at Hungary. But I think right now where my head's at is definitely at least Oscar Piastri and run the Aston Martin constructor and Alonso in these slots here. I do like McLaren, as I mentioned, and the pit stops for Silverstone, 10 points there. They had 10 points in Austria as well. So really good result and omen for them heading into this weekend as well. They've had only to Red Bull, I think they've scored 122 points in the last 2 weeks, one short of Mercedes. So essentially almost equal second for most points scored from a constructor overall, which I think is a really, really good sign for a team priced at around 10 and a half or so. So anyway, going back to my team, I think realistically it's going to be, as of right now, Ricciardo in the budget slot, Piastri in, and Aston Martin here. But as always, wait for practice because they are, I guess, the days or the sessions that mean the most and inform us the most when it comes to making those decisions. So that's where my head's at. Things could change, but just wanted to get some thoughts down for the time being. As always, if you guys have enjoyed what you've seen, if you have any different thoughts on what your team build is going to look like, let me know in the comments below, because there is a lot of deliberation given how open the template is at the moment. Certainly with these lower owned picks as well, those differentials are going to mean so much to making up ranks. So Ricardo at 0% currently, I think he'll increase and will probably to around 10 to 15%, I would say, by the race day, or by the deadline, but we'll just have to wait and see. So I think lots of options, really exciting time for the game given that the template's wide open. And hopefully you'll hear from me before the deadline with final thoughts. But as always, check me out on Twitter, F1 Fantasy Hub, for my weekly race week preview as well. Thanks guys for watching as always, and I'll see you all very soon.